They never saw it coming. Not the way the police lights would illuminate their perfect brick home at 3 a.m., nor the officers who would quietly ask to speak with Miss Caldwell. Not the sound of drawers opening, documents being removed, or the way a single white envelope would change everything. But me? I saw it all. I saw it the moment I heard my mother's voice echo one final time, "We're not funding this circus." I stood in the shadows outside their home that night, watching. My breath formed small clouds in the cold, each exhale steadier than the last. My heart didn't race. It marched. Because by then, I wasn't the girl they thought they could break. I was something else entirely, a woman made of quiet rage, ready to light the match. And the match had already been struck 3 weeks earlier with a single word. Understood. Rewind. My name is Lila Caldwell. To outsiders, we were the American dream incarnate. Two-story perfection, manicured lawn, glinting SUVs in the driveway. My mother, Veronica, queen of charity luncheons and backhanded compliments. My father, George, silent, loyal, spineless. And my sister? Juliet. The golden child, the queen of curated chaos, influencer of absolutely nothing real. I was the quiet one. The good girl. The disappointment who followed every rule but still ended up with nothing they valued. My dream had always been fashion design. I sketched gowns in the corners of my math textbooks, layered colors and threads in my head like spells. But in our house, dreams were threats to order, to status, to my mother's illusion of control. The first time she found my sketchbook, I was 14. I remember her heels clicking across the floor as she walked in. She picked up the book, flipped through it with narrowed eyes, then tore out every page. One by one. "Art doesn't pay mortgages," she said. "You're not wasting your life on nonsense." My father said nothing, just nodded behind her like a shadow. So I buried my dream. Chose accounting. Clean. Safe. Respectable. Something my mother could say with pride at dinner parties. But I never stopped drawing. Juliet, on the other hand, got everything. Freedom. Applause. She enrolled in design school because it was on trend and opened a boutique called Juliet's Edit. My mother sponsored the launch with champagne and a red carpet. I was asked to take the group photo. Then came Ian. I met him at a nonprofit gala I was dragged to by a coworker. Ian worked with at-risk teens. He smiled with his whole face, listened like your words mattered, and believed in things like integrity and second chances. My parents called it noble, the way people do when they're being condescending. My mother asked him what he drove. My sister asked him why he didn't want more. 3 years. That's how long Ian stood by me. Through every dinner full of invisible daggers, every holiday where his name was barely spoken. We planned everything ourselves. The wedding was going to be held at the Belmere Estate, an elegant garden venue tucked outside the city, surrounded by ivy-covered archways and old stone fountains. I loved it because it was beautiful. Ian loved it because I did. When my mother offered to help with the funding, I thought maybe, just maybe, we were turning a page. I should have known better. I still remember that morning. The sky was dull gray, the kind that presses down on you. I was called back to the family house, told there were details to go over. I wore a soft cream blouse and flats. I thought it was going to be about centerpieces. I walked in, and the silence met me like a wall. Mom by the fireplace, arms folded, perfect as a statue. Juliet lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she was too bored to blink. Dad staring at the floor. "We're not funding the circus," Mom said, slicing the air with her voice. No preamble. No explanation. Just a guillotine drop. Juliet didn't even look up. "Better luck next time," she said, smirking like it was cute. My throat tightened, 1,000 retorts lining up behind my tongue. I could have shouted, begged, asked why. But all I said was, understood. And I walked out. They thought I'd come back. I always did. Thought I'd apologize for daring to want more. But they had no idea that in that moment, something in me cracked open. Something that had been waiting to rise for years. 3 weeks later, I was knee-deep in contracts, receipts, timelines. Alone in my apartment, the cream and gold invitations still in their box. That's when I noticed it, the speed of the cancellations. Too fast. Too organized. The venue, florist, caterer. All pulled out within 24 hours. And when I called the Belmere estate, the coordinator hesitated. Miss Caldwell, we received your signed cancellation request yesterday morning. I didn't send one, I said, heart-dropping. It had your signature. I hung up and stared at the black screen of my phone, my reflection ghostly. Someone had forged my name. They hadn't just sabotaged my wedding. They had erased me from it entirely. That night, I opened the old desk drawer I hadn't touched in years. At the very bottom, under old receipts and utility bills, was my high school sketchbook. The one I thought was lost. The pages were crumpled, smudged, but the designs were still there. So was the feeling. That raw, electric need to create. Something clicked into place. I made a list. Every vendor, every account, every name. And then I remembered Diane Marks. She was the attorney who once helped my firm through a merger. Brilliant, unshakable, and terrifying in the best way. I made an appointment for the next morning. When I laid it all out. The forged documents, the cancellations, the money trail, Diane didn't blink. She just asked, do you want to burn them quietly or publicly? I looked her dead in the eye. I want the whole town to hear them scream. Diane moved like a storm wrapped in silk. Calm, elegant, but every word she spoke had weight, a kind of gravity that bent the room around her. We spent the next few days digging. Every charge, every wire transfer, every contract. The deeper we went, the more rot we uncovered. Juliet's boutique? Funded through my name. The Belmere cancellation? Sent from an email address that was one letter off from mine. The floral deposit? Refunded to my mother's account. The more I saw, the clearer it became. This wasn't just sabotage. This was embezzlement, masked as maternal wisdom. I started sleeping with my laptop on. If I woke in the middle of the night, I pulled it into my lap and kept digging. It became an obsession, a quest. And every click felt like peeling away another mask. On the third night, I opened a password-protected PDF that had been buried inside an archived email from Juliet's web designer. My breath caught. It was a spreadsheet. Expenses, invoices, and a tab labeled internal use only. Under that were lines showing purchases for designer fixtures, marketing campaigns, and even luxury travel, all itemized as being paid through Trust ACCT LC0932. My trust account. Diane confirmed it. This isn't just theft. It's premeditated. And the paper trail is gold. Then, the break in the case arrived unexpectedly. My phone buzzed. Uncle Henry. We hadn't spoken in over a year, ever since he called my mother a narcissist at Thanksgiving. I picked up. Lila, I heard what happened, he said. But it goes deeper than you think. How much deeper? His voice dropped. Your grandfather left a trust. For you. Nearly 300 grand. Activated only upon legal marriage. Your parents were custodians. But they've been drawing from it for years. Quietly. The wedding would have triggered a financial audit. They couldn't risk it. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, the world going quiet around me. 300,000. Not just my wedding. Not just my future. My entire financial security, siphoned off for Juliet's boutique, my parents' new kitchen, their perfectly staged lives. They made sure you wouldn't get married, Henry said, voice tight. Because if you did, everything they took would come to light. I hung up and sent Diane everything. Her reply came fast. We file Monday. Full fraud. Forgery. Theft. Restraining orders if needed. That weekend, the calls began. First mom. Then dad. Juliet. All the same. Faux concern. Thinly veiled threats. Let's not make this ugly, Lila. We just need to talk. You don't want to destroy the family over a misunderstanding. But they misunderstood one thing. I wasn't the girl who said understood anymore. I sent one reply. Court. 9 a.m. Monday. Bring your best lies. The night before court, I sat in my apartment with Ian. He poured me tea, his hands warm against the mug. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to tell me it would be okay. He just listened. "I always knew you were strong," he said quietly. "But you're something else now." I smiled. For the first time in weeks, it reached my eyes. Because he was right. The courthouse loomed like a monument to reckoning, its marble pillars washed in morning light that did nothing to warm the sharp November wind slicing through my coat as I walked up the steps alone, every footfall echoing louder than the last, not because of sound, but because of certainty. The certainty that I was no longer afraid, no longer silenced, no longer theirs to manipulate, contain, or erase. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed above polished tile floors, the waiting area filled with the rustle of papers and murmured conversations, a kind of prelude hum before the orchestra of justice began, and I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Diane, whose presence was a steel wall dressed in a tailored blazer, her confidence settling over me like armor as the bailiff called out the case. Caldwell versus Caldwell. The name struck harder than expected, like swallowing glass, but I sat tall, watching as my parents and sister shuffled in, heads held high out of habit, not pride, their clothes expensive, expressions measured, but nothing could cover the strain behind their eyes. The twitch of Mom's fingers, the tight clutch of Dad's jaw, the way Juliet's foot tapped like a metronome counting down to exposure. The judge entered, gray-haired and unreadable, his robe billowing slightly as everyone stood, and then sat in practiced unison, and then it began, Diane rising, commanding the room without ever raising her voice, presenting documents like daggers. Pointing to forged signatures, misappropriated funds, unauthorized access to financial accounts, each statement crisp and methodical, her tone never dramatic, only deliberate, as if she were dismantling a machine one bolt at a time. And every bolt led to them. To Veronica Caldwell, who signed off on boutique expenses using my trust account number, to George Caldwell, who approved loan transfers as family assistance, while marking them as reimbursed, to Juliet, who took every dime and called it a gift she didn't know came wrapped in fraud. Diane handed the judge evidence folder after evidence folder, and each time it landed on the bench with a weighty thump, it was like another nail in the coffin they built for themselves. Then it was my turn. I took the stand, my palms flat, voice steady as I described what happened from the beginning. The sabotaged wedding, the forged cancellations, the trust one didn't know existed until it was nearly drained, the years of erasure masked as discipline, the manipulation dressed as love, how every understood, had cost me a part of myself until I learned silence wasn't safety, it was surrender. I didn't cry. Not once. Because pain had already burned me hollow, and now only purpose remained. Juliet went next. Her facade cracked faster than I expected. She denied, stumbled, contradicted herself. Diane pounced. The judge asked questions. And by the time she was shown the spreadsheet with her own initials on boutique invoices tagged to my account, she looked like a candle held to fire. Mom tried to recover it all with a speech. We were protecting her. From herself. From making a mistake. That boy, he was never good enough. But when the judge asked, "And how does stealing from your daughter's trust protect her?" she faltered. Dad said nothing. Not even a denial. Only silence. And in that silence, I finally heard the truth. When the judge finally lifted his eyes from the last page of documents, an eerie stillness filled the courtroom, the kind that presses against your chest like gravity shifting, and though I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed it in the shower, in the car, in the middle of sleepless nights, I felt something deeper than adrenaline rising inside me, something like resolve anchored in centuries of women who'd never gotten to speak, women like me who'd had their autonomy signed away with someone else's pen. His voice, cool and authoritative, sliced through the silence like a verdict long overdue. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Lila Caldwell. There was no gasp, no grand outburst. Just the quiet collapse of three people on the other side of the aisle who had spent their lives carefully maintaining an image that could no longer bear its own weight. All misappropriated funds from the trust are to be returned to the plaintiff immediately. Additionally, due to evidence of fraud and emotional distress, the court awards damages in the amount of $75,000. My mother closed her eyes as if she were praying, but she wasn't praying, she was counting losses. My father's shoulders dropped like a marionette cut loose. Juliet let out a sharp exhale that was either disbelief or entitlement finally shattering. Diane leaned over and whispered, "That's what justice sounds like." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I stood, gathered my things, and walked out without looking back. Outside, the courthouse steps felt steeper than they had that morning, but lighter, too, like they no longer led back to a world where I owed anyone anything. Reporters weren't swarming us. There were no flashing cameras, no microphones shoved into my face. It was just sky, open, unfiltered, and blue. Ian waited beside the car, eyes searching my face. "So, it's done," I said, and for once, the words didn't feel like a finish line. They felt like the beginning. 1 week later, I returned to the Belmere estate, not for vengeance, not for closure, but for a kind of reclamation. The archway where I had once imagined walking toward a life built with love now stood empty beneath the climbing ivy, and as I stood there alone, my veil trailing behind me in the wind, I didn't see loss, I saw possibility. Ian joined me under the oak tree at the far end of the garden, a quiet witness to the day we didn't need anyone's approval for. There was no crowd, no parents, just a small circle of people who had helped me rebuild, Uncle Henry, Diane. A few friends who had stayed even when things got hard. I walked down that makeshift aisle alone. No one gave me away because I didn't belong to anyone anymore. Ian's smile was a lighthouse, steady and warm. When we said our vows, I didn't say "I do" just to him. I said it to myself. To every version of me that had waited to be free. Later that night, as the sun dipped below the hills and the lights around the estate flickered on like starlight, I stood in the quiet of our suite, my wedding dress hanging loosely from my shoulders, and I opened my laptop. Sketches spilled across the screen, blazers, dresses, boots, lines both bold and unashamed, each one carrying pieces of me I had once been told to erase. My brand was finally coming together. Not Juliet's edit. Not Veronica's perfection. Mine. And when the first official email came through, a boutique in another state offering to feature my work, I didn't hesitate. I said yes, because this was the new chapter, and they didn't get to write it. The weeks that followed blurred into a new rhythm, one not built on crisis or control, but choice. For the first time in my life, I woke up each morning knowing the decisions I made belonged to me. No stage dinners. No subtle critiques. Just quiet mornings, coffee in a real mug instead of a travel cup, and a home filled with light that didn't feel borrowed. The boutique launched with a soft opening on a Thursday, small and curated, the kind of place where every piece told a story. Mine weren't just clothes, they were reclamations stitched into fabric, revenge whispered in seams. My debut line was called Unspoken, a name Diane suggested over drinks one night, both of us laughing when I toasted to the silence that once swallowed me whole now becoming my signature. And it sold. Quickly. Pieces were picked up by fashion bloggers, stylists, even a journalist who wrote a piece titled, "The Dressmaker Who Turned Betrayal into Art." I kept the clipping in a drawer not because I needed proof, but because there was something delicious in knowing the same world my mother worshipped for approval now whispered my name instead. Then the messages started again. Voicemails, emails, letters. Mom writing with delicate phrasing, trying to mask her panic behind phrases like, "We made mistakes" or "families stumble." Dad's messages came too short, riddled with regret and still without spine. Juliet's were a carousel of apology and blame, depending on the hour. She'd lost the boutique, drained what was left of her social capital, and was working part-time managing someone else's inventory. I almost felt sorry for her almost. But sympathy without accountability is just permission to repeat the damage. I didn't reply. Not because I hated them, but because I had finally learned the difference between peace and pretending. Silence, once their weapon, had become my boundary. Then one afternoon, an envelope arrived. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a faded photograph, me at 8 years old, sitting beside my grandfather on the porch, sketching dresses in a notebook too big for my lap. On the back, in his handwriting, it said, "For Lila, when the world tells you no, make something so beautiful they can't ignore it." I sat on the floor and cried, not because I was broken, but because I finally felt whole enough to mourn everything I'd buried. All the versions of myself I wasn't allowed to be. The artist. The rebel. The girl who dared to dream before the world taught her to shrink. Ian found me like that, knees tucked to my chest, fingers gripping that photo like it might disappear. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just sat beside me, wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and let the silence say everything. Eventually, I got up. I framed the photo and hung it above my new desk. A desk with fabric swatches in one drawer and court documents in another. Because my past wasn't erased. It was honored. One night, I finally wrote them one last message, not to start over, not to rehash, just to close the chapter for good. To Veronica, George, and Juliet. I see what you did. And now, so does everyone else. There's nothing left to discuss. Goodbye. I didn't sign it. They didn't deserve the finality of my name. I hit send. And the silence that followed was the loudest peace I'd ever known. Today, I stand in my boutique, watching a young girl hold up one of my dresses to a mirror, her mother beaming beside her. I hear them whisper about how beautiful she looks, how confident. The girl glances at the price tag, then at me. "Did you design this?" she asks. "I did," I say, smiling. And it feels like something cosmic, the same little girl I used to be, now standing tall, ready to tell the world what she's worth. My mother once called my wedding a circus. She was right about one thing. There were clowns. But I was never one of them. I was the ringmaster. And now? The tent is mine. The spotlight is mine. The silence is mine. And the show is just beginning.